how do you feel when you enter a space? Because that is the essence of what the architecture is. So a well-built or a well-designed space for me would be a space that would be calming, or gives me a reaction of what I should expect of the activities there. So for example, if I'm going to see a concert, I would really love to hear some beautiful acoustics, just entering in, and all I can hear is these like well-layered echoes or something. If I'm entering an art gallery, the lighting has to be exquisite so that we can see everything. So it adds to the feeling of the experience of what is happening there. So if you design well, you were able to actually evoke emotion.
Welcome to Unhinged Podcast, a design discourse, where we explore stories behind architecture, design, and urbanism. Through conversations with architects and innovators, we uncover how spaces shape culture, identity, and communities. From sustainability to heritage and future cities, we dive into the ideas transforming our built environment. Today's episode features a dynamic young woman who is redefining what it means to be a creative. She's an architectural designer, a visual artist, a soulful musician, and a farmer. Her work flows across disciplines, blending nature, culture, and design into powerful expressions of identity and innovation.
Today our guest is THATO
Jessica.
She's an artist, a creative director, an architect, a farmer bay, and many, many more. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from and what you do?
Okay, hi Lorato. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you.
Like you've already mentioned, my name is THATO Jessica. I'm a creative director, artist, architect, designer, and a farmer. And basically, I'm just an all-around creative person. Like, I just love to do things with my hands. I love to travel. I love to ride on horses. But I like to just explore different things, go different places. And I'm just a lover of life and new things.
So just to start off things a little bit fun, to break the ice. A couple of icebreaker questions. What's your first memory of noticing a building and thinking, wow?
Okay, the first memory that comes to my mind is the time when I was at my grandparents' shop. So it was almost like this, how can I say? It was like this face brick shop that had a butchery and a little bar area with a sound thingy there and like a high stoop when I was a child. So it made me really like feel amazed because that was the biggest building that I had seen at my age then. So when I saw it, I was like, wow.
If architecture had a soundtrack, right? What genre would your design style be?
Oh my gosh, that's not fair because I'm also a musician, so it's hard for me to pick. But if it was a genre, Amapiano.
Amapiano?
Yeah.
Why Amapiano?
Because I think Amapiano is a reflection of the young, and it's also our sound. So that's basically what I feel my architecture is right now. It's young and it's also seeking its self-identity, or rather to express itself in the work, so I guess that's it.
So that's a good one. Now the other one says, if your architecture star were a food, right? What would it be and why?
A food. I think, oh my god, there's so many things like we're running. Okay, I would say a pineapple. I would say a pineapple because first of all it's a fruit and fruit is natural, and I am very inclined to ecological design. So obviously I would pick a fruit, but also the tanginess of it, like it's yellow, it's vibrant, I think that's how my
pattern.
You see, it has a pattern on it. So I think
it has a personality. Let me just say
it does. It has a crown.
Okay. Now, people usually have like a deeper meaning as to why they do what they do. Right? So what would be like your personal meaning to what does architecture mean to you personally?
Well, architecture for me is a platform to express our philosophy, to express what we believe in, and to materialize the thoughts of what we see our world or what we aspire to have as our world, you know. So the buildings that we create, the parks, the landscaping, all of it is architecture. And for me, it's a way of expressing what I believe and my philosophy.
So what first drew you to architecture or design?
Well, to be honest, like I started architecture because my uncle was a civil engineer and he used to draw. He's the one who actually taught me how to draw, and I just thought, okay, if I do architecture, then it's similar to civil engineering, you know. But I was also inclined to a lot of art and design and technology at high school, so it just made sense for me to go that direction. I also have a cousin who's an architect, so just getting some advice from her also just like added to me wanting to do it.
Yeah. Has like the way you have grown or brought up influenced the way you experience and approach architecture?
Absolutely. I think because I've lived in very many settings, like from a village to a town to like a metropolitan city like Johannesburg, you know, it's given me a lot of exposure in terms of the environment, but also just how people build as well, and also just my own personal experience of how the spaces made me feel like and what they inspired me to do, learning to make the most out of little, learning to learn from the past, learning to integrate the future like your AI and, you know, metropolis type of designs into simple but sophisticated you know, approach to design.
In your view, what is the emotional or psychological power of a well-designed space?
Okay, well, for me, it's all about how a space makes you feel. How do you feel when you enter a space? Because that is the essence of what the architecture is. So a well-built or a well-designed space for me would be a space that would be calming, or gives me a reaction of what I should expect of the activities there. So for example, if I'm going to see a concert, I would really love to hear some beautiful acoustics, you know, just entering in and all I can hear is these like well-layered echoes or something. You know, if I'm entering an art gallery, the lighting has to be exquisite so that we can see everything. So it adds to the feeling of the experience of what is happening there. So if you design well, you were able to actually evoke emotion. Yeah.
That's good. That's a good one. I was gonna ask now, what does good design mean to you personally?
Yeah.
You know, beauty being subjective.
Yes.
You know, a good could be subjective too. Although morally you can't argue it, but
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Beauty is subjective. And also in the world of architecture, there's always this big debate about form versus function. And that's where, you know, the beauty aspect of it comes in, because form is all about what we look at. Is it pleasing to the eye? How do we respond to things like that? So, well, we spoke about having the space invoking an emotion, right? But when it comes to beauty, I think what is beautiful is what I can see myself in. If I can see a reflection of myself in something, it makes it beautiful because it makes it relatable. So I think beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, because you can either relate with it or not. So if there's that level of relatability, is that a word? If there's relatability, then there's an aspect of beauty for me in there. Yeah.
Now, talking about the fusion of architecture, music, and art, since you're an artist also, where do you see the strongest parallels between architecture, music, and art?
Okay, so this takes me to my thesis. Yes. My thesis topic was the music in architecture, and I was basically exploring all of these different facets that bring music and architecture together. And I would say that the top three most principles that I can highlight is harmony, it's rhythm, and then it's also melody. Surprisingly, buildings are also melody, because I remember reading a quote that says that architecture is frozen music. And that for me was something that opened up a whole bunch of other doors in terms of like how I view music and architecture. But I would say harmony, rhythm, and melody, those are the things that make music and architecture.
Yeah, because the next question was going to be, how can rhythm,
Yeah.
harmony, and emotion be translated into physical
Spaces,
Yes,
yeah.
because music you are hearing, it's waves.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can picture,
Exactly.
but you feel.
You feel it.
But
Absolutely.
in a physical space, you can
Touch.
yes see.
Absolutely, that's a good question. So, and on my thesis, what we decided to do is we came up with a song. We composed a song from beginning to end, so that we can explore these physical aspects of music and comparing them to architecture, and how we can translate that to the land, the setting, the site. So we came up with a song. It was like about 2 minutes, and we translated that into heights, weights, ratios of what spaces could become. And we looked at our site location. So our site was opposite the CBD in Gaborone, and we were building an ecological park. Basically, what I was designing, I'm not saying building. We were designing an ecological. Hopefully, someday.
It's a concept.
You know,
it's a
thank you.
conceptual design.
Hopefully, someday we'll actually build it.
But I doubt. Hopefully, though.
Okay, well, I was designing an ecological park, and we translated, because it was me and the music producer, so we translated the different transitions into spaces, into ratios, into functions, and then what we ended up having was this experience where you start off at a nature park, and then you gently go up into like a metropolis city, CBD, high-rise building. So that in itself created a story on the land that felt like a musical piece. And even as you go through it, you can start to feel the differences of the energy and even of the spaces themselves as they transition. So that's how I did it, but I think there's many other ways of translating music into architecture. Some do it literally, where they turn notes into structure and form, or some sort of like layout on the floor plan. So there's many ways of like translating it. That was my way. I still want to explore it more, because I feel like there's something there. But yeah, that's my exploration.
It's quite. I think there's a depth to it. It's something that could come out rich.
Yeah.
So do you think multidisciplinary design makes architecture more human? Why or why not?
Absolutely. I think in general, just being a multidisciplinary designer is an advantage, because you have so many fields that you're exposed to, and that in turn gives you more awareness when you're designing. If you are, let's say for example, in the field of sports, when you're designing for open spaces, you have the agility or the physical memory of what that space looks like and feels like. So you can add those specific details that is needed, like let's say maybe to make the sports people comfortable, or let's say maybe you're at the farm and you understand that, okay, we need to feed the animals on this, so we need a structure like this. So it's easier for you to now contextualize yourself as you're designing for various things. And even just coming up with new ideas, it's very good, because now you have all this exposure. So how does it make us more human? I think generally all humans are very versatile, to be honest. We're not as monotonous as we think. Yes, the careers that we choose, we think, okay, yes, just because I'm an architect, that's it, or just because I'm an interior designer, that's it. No, when you get home, you're actually a cook in the kitchen, and in the bathroom you're a hairstylist, and somewhere you're fixing your shoe, you're a carpenter if you're fixing your wardrobe. So there are all these different facets that we carry on our daily basis. But if now you can now incorporate that as a design expertise, it gives you a better range when it comes to designing. So I think it's good for people to be, or to aim to be, multidisciplinary. Yeah.
And I think because we ought to live like different experiences for us to become better designers.
Absolutely.
As in, we need to experience life more. We need to experience different things more, so that when you're given like a project to do, you're able to immerse yourself and apply yourself.
That's very true.
Yeah. Let's talk about designing for everyone, right? Inclusive and accessible architecture.
Yes.
So what would inclusive design look like beyond wheelchair ramps? Because when we think inclusive design, we are thinking, oh, the
disability.
Yes, the disabled, and you know.
That's a very good question, because one thing that we need to be as designers is culturally aware. We need to be aware of other people and the setting and how it has affected them, the psychology as well, because making spaces accessible means inviting people in. And inviting people in means making spaces less intimidating. Because if you notice, let's say you're going for your first interview at an office, it's a big corporate space, you have these glass walls and solid steel, everything is so rigid, and it makes you tense.
Yes.
So so even when you enter the office, by the time the interviewer asks you, how are you doing?
You're shaking.
Exactly. And that is kind of excluding people away, because there's a lack of inclusivity when it comes to accepting people in. So I think having that level of awareness of having welcoming spaces, calming down spaces, and also just understanding the context. If I'm at a village and I know that I'm designing for older people, I need to make sure that everything is labeled in Setswana. They can see, okay, that room goes there, this goes there, because I understand that these are older people. They're in a setting of a village, so they need to take everything step by step. So that's the kind of awareness that comes with that type of thinking process.
What would be like the biggest misconceptions that clients or designers have to accessibility or about accessibility?
Well, depending on how the client defines accessibility, I think it will differ from person to person. But if we're talking about it on the social context, I think that most people are actually not aware that they're excluded from buildings. They're not aware, because first of all, we don't even see ourselves in our own buildings, so that shows that we are excluded. And also just the fact that there's a lack of comfort in spaces. So I think it's a matter of making people aware of what exclusivity looks like, So
Going about our country, right, Botswana. What do you think are like the architectural gaps that exist here in Botswana? In terms of rethinking spaces for leisure and entertainment, or just space generally.
I think the one that is in my heart, the one that I took personally is materiality. Yes, materiality is a huge aspect when it comes to architecture, but it seems like we have now just went the commodified route of concrete, glass, steel. We haven't explored things like rammed earth or carbons and all these various materials that are available and locally sustainable designs can come out of these. So I think materiality is one gap that needs to be filled in Botswana, because there's a huge opportunity for us to study vernacular materiality and enhance it according to the modern designs that we have now. I think another thing would also be the legalities of building codes, development codes as well, just the updating and also the elevating of our sort of presence as Botswana within that, because we have indigenous architecture that hasn't been represented and has kind of been lost or been put on the backseat for quite some time. So just bringing it back forward again and elevating it, that's something that needs to be done through the legislation, as well as just various codes of the building framework.
I believe we still got a long way to go.
Yeah, we do. But there's hope and there's also excitement, because I think the upcoming architects who I'm working with are very excited about different materials and also just going outside of the box from what we're used to. Yeah,
that's true. So what kind of public or leisure spaces do you feel are missing in Botswana? because we got entertainment spaces, right? But when we call entertainment spaces here, we're talking about clubs.
Yeah.
We're talking about
Stadiums
bars,
even.
we're talking about stadiums.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have like proper spaces where you can leisure around, you know, have communal,
Yes.
you know.
What we're lacking actually is the mixed use of parks and what would I say? Parks and like your restaurants, like your leisure, for example. If we can have spaces that are integrated within parks that have activities, to have your ecological designs where people can now have your food forests and, you know, plant different things, communal gardens and all of these activities. So those need a piece of land that is wide enough to cater for landscaping, but also just for activities as well, where, you know, we can have cycling and all of these things. That's a level of entertainment that people don't even think about. You know, it's just like, oh, whatever, it's a cycle, but it's that's how you entertain yourself. Yeah.
I think Solofelo Park, right, in some way has tried to achieve that a bit.
Yeah.
Because back then when I was in school, when we were still using it for sites and stuff, it was abandoned and stuff. But now
I remember.
Now they have redeveloped it, and it incorporates like a restaurant area. The park is lively. Yeah, so I think if we can have more of those, and also the F&B park, I think it does that also, but we don't have more of those.
More of those, yeah. And also, I think what would put a lot more life into the design of that park and restaurant integration is spreading the activities out. Because what has happened now, if you look at Park 27, it's more of like the restaurant is isolated to the corner and then the park is like over there, so you don't really see that integration. But let's say maybe they had like a main line where people are walking, and then you'd have these activities spread across the main line. It would activate the entire park. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that is an example. It can also be improved, you know. But it's a starting point to having mixed use spaces that, you know, encourage entertainment. Yeah.
I think that also goes into how our malls are designed.
Yeah. Malls.
Because I think one thing I noticed about some of the malls in South Africa, like Mall of Africa, the one in Rosebank also, is that it's not only about the shopping complexes or the retail spaces, right?
Yeah.
They also have like spaces where the activities, playful activities within those malls where kids can come, not even kids, young people, all people of all ages can come in and play.
Waterworks.
So you go to the mall, you shop, you play, you eat.
Yes.
It's a plethora of
holistic things. And like a holistic experience, because you can now leave your kids while you're still
How can architecture support social connection, relaxation and creativity in our communities? Talking to leisure and entertainment spaces.
I think the first and most important thing is to identify the activities that are already happening inside or in the society or the neighborhood, so that you can accustom them to whatever it is that you're designing or that you're proposing, so that the building doesn't become empty to a point where people are just like, what is this? What does it do? You know, people end up not using something if they're not familiar with it. But if there's a sense of, okay, we do this, now they put it in a building, it gives that sort of like invitation to say, come here for community, come here to do stuff. And I think just understanding what do people need in this environment and enhancing it by, you know, your new proposal.
What do you think leisure and entertainment are often overlooked in design priorities?
Well, I don't think people are aware that they're overlooked, one thing. But I think they are overlooked because, to be honest, architecture has been very capitalistic focused. I don't know if that's a word to use, but it's very, it's more about let's make money. You know, so even the buildings, it reflects on the architecture as well, that the buildings that we do, the buildings that we design are mostly just for function. You know, your offices, even your normal houses nowadays is just typical designs, nothing out of the ordinary. So then that kind of like takes away the charm from, you know, having spaces that actually speak to us. Architecture is a reflection of our society. You find that we ourselves don't really take seriously what we call leisure. You know, we think that chilling at home is enough. You know, we haven't really considered the spaces that we require, like your parks. We have spoken about parks, you know, even spas or even retreats or things like that that can now become communal spaces where, you know, people have entertainment and they're also able to relax and heal and do all these other social activities. Yeah.
What would a Botswana first, you know, not like first as in first, but a Botswana-centric, let me put it that way. A Botswana-centric entertainment space look like and feel like?
Okay, well, first of all, I really, truly believe in radial design, in circular design. I feel like that is the best way for us to experience or expand our energy. And performance is all about energy, sharing that energy, sharing that emotion. So in a circular environment, that's why I think a lot of auditoriums and performance spaces are circular, because that's like the most ideal type of situation, you know. But it's not something new to us, because even in the khotla, we had that set up, or we have that set up where we are sitting in a circular environment and then we have this focal point, either a fire or somebody speaking in front of us. So an ideal, or I would say the Botswana-esque look for an entertainment space would definitely have to be circular. It would definitely have to be surrounded by the you know. I mean, we'd obviously have to translate it into something more modern, like a facade design or something, but the essence of it is to just have this thing containing us within, and then also having connection to the ground. Because I think what we have lost over the modernity of architecture is that we lost that connection with the actual ground, you know, and that in itself disconnects us from our environment. So bringing back that connection to the ground would be an ideal thing for a space, you know, this is where we entertain ourselves and this is how we do community.
Because entertainment from back then, still, it was all about that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Dancing traditional songs, I think, choir,
yes.
yeah.
Barefooted, touching the ground, because there's also an energetic aspect to us connecting with our ground, you know. So those are some of the things even though we might have not necessarily interpreted it from our past, it's now things that we can acknowledge to say, oh, so it was connecting them to the ground, it was giving them some sort of spiritual experience, you know. So I think just going back and figuring out, oh, okay, this is this is that, it gives us more to work with now.
So now talking about the human psyche in architecture, right? How should architecture evolve to reflect the mental health challenges of urban life?
I think architecture stands at a very great opportunity to be an element of healing for people, and not just healing, but a tool for us to create sacred spaces where we can be intimate with one another in community. Like, you know, instead of just having churches as this sacred space or like a mosque, we can have spaces where we have the community come together and, you know, have that level of connection. So I think architecture is a great tool for us to actually heal our communities with. You know, the types of buildings that we put people in is going to influence how they view themselves, the world around them, and also how they approach things in life. Because for example, if you, I don't know if you, it's called the Freudian theory, I'm not sure, but there was an experiment where they had studied rats to figure out how they reproduce and how they grow and all of that. So basically what they understood is that once a community or society is formed, there's a group or mentality that develops out of it, right? And that's based on the environment that they're around. So the rats were put in a controlled environment where the like the movements and everything like that was controlled, right? and that created a certain behavior from them. So having that level of awareness to know that when we create spaces, we are also shaping psychology is something that needs to be a priority, like when we're thinking about psychology as well.
Even then, bringing it down like to your individual space.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in your room, when you're in your lounge, or just in your house, it does affect your mental health somehow. Right.
Yeah.
So how do we speak to that?
To the individual space to say how then do we deal with the mental load? That's a very good question. I think it's coming back to reimagining what it is to be in a space. What does it mean to be in a living? What does it mean to be in the kitchen? What are the activities that happen? And what are the things that are missing? Because once we break down the things that happen in a space, it's easy for us to design for it. More than that, it's easy for us to imagine what it could be, you know. So I think understanding in depth what we do will, like on a daily basis, will inform our designs in such a way that we can improve our psychology. Yeah.
Okay. In what ways can buildings reinforce or disrupt cultural identity?
I think when it comes to cultural identity, it's being able to see yourself in the work or being able to see yourself in a building. And without that recognition, it becomes difficult for you to appreciate yourself, you know. Earlier we spoke, I don't know if earlier we spoke about this.
Wow.
Earlier we spoke about this,
Yes.
where we said that
It's a funny story, it's okay.
earlier we had spoken about us coming to the cities as this urban migration is happening, that when we arrive we see steel, glass and concrete. These are things that we cannot relate with from if you grew up in the village, you know what there's thatch, you know, those are the kind of materials that we associate with our identity, culture, or what we call home. So being able to, or rather coming to a city and not being able to see yourself or a reflection of where you're from, it gives you a certain impression about yourself. You know, if we see the city as success and the village as something to run away from, we're going to associate the architectural designs of the village with something to run away from, you know. So just coming back to that identity to say, let's take our materiality, let's take our design and redefine it for ourselves, what the modern interpretation of our architecture would look like, you know. So with that element, it then now creates a sense of pride with the identity that we have, and even our heritage and our culture. So I think that's where architecture plays a huge role in terms of like shaping how we view ourselves and the world around us, and you know, the way that we design our buildings.
That's a good one. What role does sensory experience play in designing for the human psyche? Sensory experience in terms of
touch, feel, taste.
Yes.
Wow, lovely question. I think every designer aims to have all your senses light up. When you enter a space, just the brightness of it should just bring glare into your eyes, you know, and the echoes from the high ceilings, you know. I think it's, when you design, it's more like you're building or writing a poem. That's how I take it, where you have an introduction, the body, and the finish, right? Which is like the entrance, the walkway, and then the final arrival space where you are, or the main space where the activity is. So it's similar to music as well, where I treat it like you're telling a story, right? Where you have a beginning, a middle, and the end, and that in itself creates a sensory experience because all of your senses are engaged from the beginning to the end, right? So yeah, a sensory experience in architecture is essential, and I think every designer aims to give you a great experience. Yeah,
it's your colors, your patterns, your texture.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Now from that question, someone can now ask, how can architects design for emotional resilience and belonging in dense cities?
Wow.
Dense cities, like, I don't think Gaborone we are that dense yet.
But it is dense.
But yeah, we are many.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us are coming here for a lot of different reasons.
Vacations,
Yeah.
So dense cities are lacking with the nature aspect of design. We are lacking the connection to trees, to the ground. I'm very big on that because I truly believe that we ourselves are nature. So that connection is essential. We have to have it. Even the food that we eat grows and comes out from the earth. So that's something that I feel has been taken away or has been minimalized with modern designs, where you have your concrete to your wall. There's no in between space of you walking through a path to go to the kitchen or something like that, where you have your in between break spaces with nature. So I think that to kind of alleviate the tension that comes with living in the city, incorporating a lot of ecological design, incorporating nature into the design, and also opening up spaces, because I think we're so boxed up in walls. There's certain things that we can do to walls without necessarily having them permanently or rigid and full on. We could even have walls that breathe, different types of approaches for us to try and interact with nature. Yeah.
I think that also speaks to how we design our public areas and
Absolutely.
public spaces.
Yeah.
Right? Now talking about the future of architecture in AI and technology, right? What excites or concerns you most about IA in the architectural design process?
What excites me about AI is the efficiency. We have a lot of options and tools to work with. There's so many other ways that now we can render, we can create 3Ds, floor plans, technical and construction drawings. We're saving a lot of time with AI. That's one. And I think two, it's allowing us to explore very many other ideas. Because it's fast, we can explore this to the fullest, that to the fullest, and compare to see, okay, which one would work best. So it's making us more efficient, it's making us work smarter, and also allowing us to be more creative. What I fear though is that it might replace the experiential aspect of architecture, where only a human being can say, wow, it's so warm in here, or oh, I think we need more light or something. Those are the little things that the humanness of us brings to design, and it's very essential, because without it then we have spaces that cannot connect with people. We just have spaces that exist but do not create some sort of evocation. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. The next question was going to be can IA ever replace the human creativity in architecture, or should it only be a tool?
There's also a new conversation rising right now in the AI space, where they're talking about consciousness and bringing these machines to life to make them think, feel, see. But the difference with architecture is that it separates us from any other intelligence, because we experience space with our own bodies. So the part where we have skin, ears, eyes, and feelings that are linked to the physical world, that's where now architecture is needed as a human experience, or as a human-led design. Because like what we just mentioned, tools, AI, machines, those can only take us to a certain level, but the rest is for us to do, Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, because basically in anything you can never take away that human aspect.
Absolutely.
Because even at the end of the day, these things are created by other humans.
Yeah. And also another thing that we need to consider is that we are also from ancestral lineages. We are not just one person. We are a culmination of people that came thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So even our mere existence, you as a person just existing alone, there's so many people that came about for you to be here. And that is something that's irreplaceable, even with technology, because technology is something that learns from the baseline of what we give it. It's not something that has intuition or some sort of like DNA sensors or whatever. So we're actually way more advanced than we think to ever be replaced by AI at this point.
Yeah.
You know.
That's good. That's good. Now, DIY versus hiring a professional.
Yes.
Let's talk about the value of a design expert, right? What are like the biggest risks or limitations of a DIY approach to design?
Yes. So I'm huge on DIY. Please do not get me wrong. I like to DIY my things, but like what you have mentioned, a professional is there for a reason. And why would you want to go to a professional? Well, first of all, the things that we do on site are more technical in terms of us tracing the sun paths, knowing the topography, understanding how the movements of the site are. Those are technical skills that you need for you to actually analyze your site properly so that you can build properly as well. Have an informed building, have a building that responds to, you know, not just the environment around it, but also the culture and all of these other aspects that come with designing. As I've mentioned before, like design is a philosophy for me. So when you are engaging with a professional, you are actually inputting into whatever it is that you have. Because a professional is only there to come and enhance what you have, your idea, and to bring it to life. So I think that's why somebody would come to me. Me.
Yeah, but then how do you justify the cost of hiring a designer to a skeptical client?
Yes.
Say I'm that client who's like, but I don't need you. I can do it.
I can do it.
Boxes are 2, 3. I
Yeah,
come up
baby.
with the I come up with the rooms. Direct.
Yeah.
So why do I need you?
Exactly. This is where now, Rona, as designers, we have to be aware of where our clients are, or just people in general, because we need to also educate them what design is all about. You know, we have the tools, we understand what we're doing, but for them it's more of like, okay, I'm in a house. That's all I want, you know. But now as a designer, that's where you come in and you explain, okay,
The importance of
space planning. Reasons would be for you to have compliance, obviously, with the council development, you know, DCC codes, building codes, and just having the necessary permits for you to do certain developments at a place. So a professional is there to actually help you to cover all of those things. You know, it's a lot more if you don't have the money, because you're gonna need site plans, go cancelling. You know, that's one. And also two, you need somebody who's going to do an effective long-standing design, something that you're sure that, you know, it's going to stand. The foundations, the details and everything are done. It's not just wishy-washy construction, because with the floor plans, that is like the blueprint of everything that you're building from there. So if you have that right, then then going forward you have less opportunity or less chances of you to either waste money with materials or, you know, doing the wrong construction or things like that. So you're avoiding a lot of errors by engaging a professional in your work. Yeah.
Okay. So when would you say is appropriate to say I can DIY? And when is it a definite that I should hire a professional?
Yeah. Well, I would say that Google is your best friend. You know, you can just Google, check it out, even on AI tools or chatbots, where you just ask, okay, do I need a professional for this or not? Can I DIY this or not? Because sometimes you can just find that, you know, somebody needs a little bit of a touch up here and there. They can do it themselves. They don't necessarily have to get a professional in. But let's say maybe you need your walls reconstructed or your windows shaped differently or something. You know, that's when now you can have or engage a professional so that you can align to the compliances and all of that.
So what would be like your advice to someone who is like hiring a designer or an architect for the very first time?
Firstly, I would say take your time. don't rush to get a designer just because you heard, oh, udirilele samama, udirilele samama. Take your time when you're picking your designer. Go through their work, ask for their portfolio so that you can see what sort of variety they work with. And also, even if you can just have a sit down to understand what kind of designer they are or what inspires them, so that you can see if whether it's somebody you can work with or not. But I think also just on the technical side, it's good to make sure that your designer is registered with a governing body like your ARC or your SACAP, somebody who can account for their accreditation or registration, so that if anything goes wrong with your building, you can go to ARC and say, hey guys, I hired this person, they did 1, 2, 3. You have somebody to fall back on for you to actually get your stuff and projects done. Yeah.
Now let's talk building smart, right? Adaptive reuse, retrofitting versus new construction. What are the benefits of reusing or retrofitting existing buildings?
Yeah, I think the main one would be the sentimental value that buildings carry. Let's say somebody was born in a house and they want to develop it. Probably they just want to keep it the same somewhere inside because it has a memory of where they were born. So there's a high sentimental value when it comes to our buildings and how we evolve with them. So I think one is sentimental value. We also spoke about cost saving effects. Cost effective, that's the word. You don't necessarily have to get new materials all the time. Sometimes you can reframe a material to do something else, and that also gives you a level of creativity, because now you're thinking of using something in a different way, and it opens up other opportunities for you to do other stuff. So I like that approach of design where you find something and you enhance it, instead of necessarily like crashing and starting everything from the ground, because even in life everything is built on something else. So just that idea of having a retrofitted building or renovating something, it gives it more meaning.
I think there are so many buildings that can be repurposed around Gaborone Road.
Yeah.
You got like abandoned spaces that are like, they are negative spaces, no longer functional. They're just there. They're just there. They're not adding value to the landscape of the the city and all that. So I think that's one thing that we should look more into, instead of
completely bringing it down. Yes. Yeah, I agree.
So how would you weigh heritage value versus design freedom in such projects? Like say for example you were to repurpose a place which was a church. Take for example, let's take for example Old Palape. You see Old Palape, that church building that has been there for like so many years.
Yes.
It's dilapidated. It's a historic place, but that if now you have to repurpose it into a restaurant or whatever, because now it's no longer maybe an issue of repurposing, but an issue of preserving and building onto what is already existing.
Absolutely.
Now you have that issue of culture, heritage, and also now you have the issue of my freedom to design what I want to design. So how do you
balance that? That's a very good question. I think the most important thing is to find out the basic elements that define that building or that space. If let's say maybe they have a big clock that is the highlight of the building, make sure to keep and preserve it, because that's the element that will continue to remind us of what this building was or what it has become. So identifying certain elements of the building or the built form that can remain the same also will create some sort of like preservation to the heritage. And then now when it comes to introducing your design or the new aspect of the design, I think it's good for you to, as a designer, to be gentle with something like that, because you don't want to just impose like a completely different style of architecture on, you know, let's say maybe a Renaissance building, and then you just come with a Gothic thing on top, you know. It doesn't make sense. So I think carrying a level of sensitivity is also essential when it comes to proposing things like that, because you have to still honor what the building was. I think there's always a way to do it.
I think there was a design competition, and this lady redesigned the church building in Old Palape. What she did is she maintained the facade with the rammed earth and stuff, and then what she now incorporated is the glasswork.
Beautiful.
It was quite
I need to see that. I actually haven't seen it.
Yeah, and she won actually.
Wow. Are they going to do it?
No.
Oh, it was just
a design competition. You know, design competitions. So it can. Okay, no, I think we have talked about this one.
Okay.
I don't know if you have an answer for this one, but what types of buildings in Botswana would benefit most from adaptive reuse?
Wow. I think I would have to do my research, hey?
Yeah.
I would definitely have to do my research. But for me, I would look for spaces, even if they don't have actual buildings, but revered spaces where communities acknowledge maybe a presence of a spiritual being or something like that, to maybe tell a story of that place with the building. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical form building, but it could be a space. Maybe there's a place go back to and you know, just creating a shading structure around that area can bring life to it, and also tell a story, you know, to say, come, let's sit down here and talk about this, you know. So I think that's another way we can try to think of retrofitting our spaces or our inheritance or our heritage.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a
building. It could be a space of significance where we can now introduce a similar design or building that aligns with it to enhance or elevate it, or the meaning of that space.
You know, adaptive reuse also speaks to sustainability, right? So when we're talking about sustainability in practice, again, what are the biggest sustainability challenges that we are facing as architects in Africa today?
One is that the style of architecture that is imposed on us is not ours. That's the biggest challenge we have, is that even in school we are taught to design like Western designers. We are taught to design for capitalists and colonialism, to put it straight, you know. So we as the Africans, as the designers, have to make an additive input in terms of like redefining ourselves, finding our identity, and then now putting it into the design work. So I think it starts with the inner work first, to say, okay, as a designer, what is it that I'm trying to bring out? Who am I? What am I building? Because that is the identity that we are carrying, you know. So the moment we can discover who we are within ourselves, it's going to reflect in our work. And the true essence of who we are, not I like golfing. No, so you know, what activities did you grow up that helped you or enhanced you? What can you build to make those activities happen regularly, you know? So I think just a deeper search within the self is going to make designers design better.
Also, we are not saying, you know, what we learn from the Western culture is entirely. We're just saying from the principles. Let us contextualize, to our environment, localize the ideas, and so that it speaks to, you know, what we are and who we are.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how would you, because we always speak go green, right? Go green, sustainability, but when you're speaking this things to clients, sometimes they're thinking, oh, that
lost in translation.
Yes. And also adds my pockets.
Yeah.
You know, it's gonna take so much from my pockets. Also knowing it's a return on investment type of deal.
Yeah.
But also, you know, but how do you balance the green ideals and budget constraints?
I think the approach with sustainability is to simplify it. We shouldn't be complex where we are expecting to have solar panels and all these other things and temperature regulators for us to say that we're sustainable. Sustainability is a matter of having a cycle that can repeat itself without depleting resources. That's sustainability. The way that we build I'm going to keep going back there because that's a lot. I've learned so much, and it's influenced me as a designer, where I've learned that materiality in itself is an approach to sustainable design. You know, where we use locally available materials instead of imported materials, and then also using them intelligently so that we use them for various aspects. Instead of just walls, we can use them for foundations and so forth. You know, getting creative with what we have is a form of sustainability. So simplifying the journey of it would be to say, what do we have here? And this is where we start. Instead of saying, I didn't go like solar panel go China, hey, this material and this, that. You know, it's so much work, and we also lose it in translation of the going green. Back to clients as well. I think also breaking down what sustainability is layer by layer, from the walls to the foundation to your ceilings to, you know, the roofing structure. Breaking it down and comparing it for clients is something that's important. You know, sometimes compared to this, you know, so a lot of designers' work also comes with educating people, because as I've mentioned, architecture is philosophy. You know, so if you're saying you're sustainable, that's a philosophical view, and it needs to be expressed, explained, so that people can appreciate it. You know, so yeah, it's also a matter of educating people. Yeah.
Whilst we're still on that, right? When we look into vernacular architecture and modern architecture, right? What do you think from the vernacular part? What do you think we need to preserve and rethink? And, you know, what do you think we need to do away with?
Yeah. Vernacular architecture is very intuitive. When you walk into the piece of land, you look at where the animals are traveling. You look at where you feel where the wind is flowing to. So it's more about the intuition, because people didn't necessarily use all these high line tools to get the exact measurements and all of that, right? So what we're missing right now in our modernization platform, or whatever it is that we're doing now, is the intuition. That's what we're missing, because with intuition then we can understand why radial designs are better for energetic flow. With intuition we can understand the spiritual elements of every building, why an arrival space is important and how we can contain arrival spaces, and all of these lessons that we learn from I would say a societal value level, but then it translates to architecture from vernacular viewpoints, right? So
in your opinion, right, what is the role of cultural heritage in the future of design?
Cultural heritage is who we are. If we can't see ourselves in the buildings that we're in, it's literally going to create a cognitive dissonance. It's going to create a self-hate, a perpetual self-hate of, why can I not see myself in anything? You know? And even though we don't think about it on a daily basis or on a surface level, building on a subconscious level, it affects us, you know? So we need to carry culture and heritage on our shoulders when we're designing, because that's the thing that gives us a sense of pride on everything that is yeah.
That's the thing you're talking about, where someone will be coming from the village and viewing the village as, you know,
less than,
you know, stuck in poverty, you know, type of vibes, and all that.
Absolutely. Hey, re tswa ko magaeng kwa re itse gore okay no go na le ntwe e agilweng ka mmu but jaanong ga o tsena mo gaborone ke gore nna ke nne mo ntweng e agileng ka you know. But I mean we have to be realistic to say that there is poverty associated with our vernacular architecture. It's something that happened because people were moving basically. So who's going to stay kumahaeng? People who are unable to work, or the elderly and children. So obviously economically it's not going to be as viable as in the cities, but it doesn't make that architectural style any less valuable. In fact, it's more valuable because it uses local material, and it also speaks to the people, you know. So
I think we're going back, eh?
We're going in circles now.
No, not like as in our Turkey. I mean, we're going back in terms of
back to the past.
Yes.
Okay.
In terms
for
of
the
how,
future.
Yes, we are
back to the
going
future.
back to the future from the past.
You know.
Okay. Now touching on architectural storytelling, expressing African identity through design.
Yes.
What does African architecture mean to you in today's context?
I like that you said African storytelling, because with African storytelling there's always a song. And remember how we spoke about how music and architecture are together. So it's very interesting that you bring these together, because architecture is supposed to tell you a story, just like music, you know. And that's something that we have always been very good at. We have always had folk tales and folklores and all these incredible storytelling tools. So architecture is also something that stands there as a tool to say, use me to create a narrative, use me to tell a story. You know, I like how in indigenous tribes, you can tell this is a Xhosa home by the patterns that they make, or you can tell that, oh, this is from Namibia, the Herero people, from the architecture, or Basara. So that level of identity is also in the expression of architecture, you know. So I think
it's a good one. The next question was going to be, how can we design, but I think you already spoke to that. Design buildings that reflect our stories, not just imported styles.
Yes, and that also goes back to the land. What do we have on the land? The land is the beginning of our storytelling, because it gives us the foundation, the material, it gives us the information about the plants, the animals, what's going on. So the land itself is that foundational part where now we begin to build everything. And that's why you said contextualizing is so important, because we don't have snow in Botswana. Okay, cool, it's a total thing, but yeah. So there's no need for us to be using snow-resistant material. What is that gonna do for us here? You know, there's no use for that. But if we can now start to align ourselves to say, okay, we're looking for heat-resistant material. Now we are creating a narrative and a story for ourselves according to the land and where we are.
That's good. Last question.
Okay.
Now, finally. How do you define success when designing for a local audience with global expectations?
Yes. And keyword there is success. Not fame.
Yes.
But success.
Yes.
So going back to the first question that you asked me, or the very first questions, that how do I define a well-designed space that is successful, right? And for us to design this well consuming space of ours, we need the context, like you said. So it has to be authentic. For us to have an impact, it has to be authentic.
Yes.
And authenticity will birth authentic designs that speak truly to who we are, and not just who we are, but our experiences. Nya banna ba rona ba Botswana ba nwa re tshwantse gore re tsenyele ba direle ko morago e re ra ba tsena a ska thodi ya bana ba robetse ka ha kana a ralla batho go sitting room a re mmelele ba tiko morago. that's a level of authenticity and acceptance to know what this is who we are as a society. Let's start solving our issues with architecture that way. It can be a little thing as putting a back door, but that can change the whole setup of how the room or the experience of the family is with that person. So it's just those little things of understanding ourselves first, so that we can authentically design, and then this can translate to an international level where people can appreciate us. We spoke about Francis Gehry, one of my favorite architects, who uses local material intelligently and uses wind and air flow to cool spaces.
Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, kindly subscribe, like, comment, and share with your friends. Bye.